Today the ds-incubator starts a new series, and it is about the reprex package, which is a word smash between reproducible examples. So the motivation for using reprex is that when you're reporting a bug or requesting a new feature or whatever you're doing that involves conversing with code, you are going to be a lot more likely to have success if you write or if you include a very good reprex. So today we are going to be overviewing the package very quickly because I don't know if you noticed, but in the last couple of series, I have structured the series so that there is a quick exit point. So the idea is that you can join for 1, 2, whatever meetups until we round something that is the minimal stuff that I think is useful, and then you can move on with your life if you want, or you can stick around to see a little bit of more detail about the topic. So this is a short series, and hopefully by the end of today we will have covered all you need to know to at least know what Replex can do for you and why you might want to use it. And then if you're interested in more details, you can hang out for maybe 1 or 2 more meetups, and then it's going to be the end. But even if you don't join future meetups, today's material should be enough, and it's going to be recorded, of course. So that's all I wanted to say about the motivation, and the rest that I want to talk about is an overview of the package, starting by just explicitly saying that it is a package, and if you want to use it, as usual, you have to do library reprex. But because it is a package designed for interactive use only, then it is also safe to add these couple of lines to your R profile. So you can open your R profile with the function from the use this package, edit_R_profile. That will pop up a file, and you can just copy paste this code. And that means that every time you start a new R session, Reprex will be available to you. So you don't need to do library Reprex, it's already there. So the motivating example that I'm going to be showing today comes from an issue that I found in the FS package a while ago. It's an issue that is already fixed, and it happened or I discovered it in the version 1.3.1 of the FS package. So this is a snippet that is a little smaller than the one that I reported when I reported that bug, but I'm going to be using this throughout this meetup and maybe in another meetup, because the point is not so much about the content of the reprex, but mostly about how to use it. So what I want to, what I notice is that this behavior that this code shows is odd, is not expected. So let me break this down for you. So here I'm, using the FS package, which is the one where I detected the bug. I wanted to be explicit about which version I was using, so I used the function package version fs that returned 1.3.1. And so this function is the star of the show, the one where I noticed the bug. So say that you have 2 files, so A and B here are the simplest way I could imagine representing the names of 2 different files, a file called A and a file called B, without an extension. So the function path extension set in the FS package is supposed to add whatever extension you say here to the right to each of the paths that are given in the first argument. So the output that I was expecting is a.csv and b.csv, but instead I got b.na. So that is the bug that I wanted to report. So I needed to start a conversation with the developer, which is Jim Hester, and Reprex helped me do that. So I'm going to show you now then what ways, in which many ways you can use Reprex to report bugs or even to start a conversation on Slack with someone. And we do that a lot of the time on our organization at 2 Degrees. And I think that this series in particular is relevant because a lot of us are older in the organization, but many of us are new. So basically creating a standard for how we prefer to talk about code could be, I think, useful. So how we create reprexes. So let me go to my RStudio here. Here we are, and I'm gonna have this here on the side. So there are a number of ways that you can use reprex. The code that I showed you before is the one that I have here. So the one that I use the most is I usually just highlight the code that I want to create a reprex for, and I press Shift Control P to pop in RStudio, in a modern version of RStudio, to pop the command navigation bar. And then I start typing reprex, and usually, that filters for these two add-ins that come with the package. And the one I like the most is reprex selection. So, if I have selected a code and if I just hit enter, that will already create a reprex for me. As you can see here now on the top right of my screen, the reprex has been created. Let me move this to the left so you can see it. So basically you see now not just the code that is here on the top left, but you also see the output, right? So that is one way in which you can create the reprex. Of course, the command navigation bar, the one that I accessed by pressing Shift-Control-P, is no more than a shortcut to clicking here in the add-ins menu and start typing something like reprex. So you access the same thing here. So that's another way that you can use reprex. So then let me show you other ways to use reprex. I'm going to make this a little smaller, so that should fit on here. So the function reprex itself, called by itself, will look for stuff that is in your clipboard, meaning that if not only I select the code, but if I also press Ctrl-C, if I copy that code, now I can go to the console and just type reprex. And that should just work. So that should create the reprex here. So let me clean it up because maybe it's not noticeable what actually happened. So if I have something in my clipboard, I go to the code, select it, and with Ctrl-A, and copy it with Ctrl-C. Then I can do Ctrl-2 to move to the console and just type reprex, right? And that will look into the clipboard, find the code, and create the reprex for me. Importantly, the reprex, the output of reprex, is not only shown in the viewer, but it's also now again back in your clipboard, meaning that if you need to share that somewhere, say that, suppose that this is a GitHub issue or something, you can just paste with Ctrl-V because it's in your clipboard, right? And what you will get, let me show you here, is the code that you type plus the output, right, commented. And that's important because, as we will see in a moment, the person who actually runs that code, if that was uncommented, that would break the code from running. I'm going to show you that in a moment. So let's close this file and navigate a few other ways in which you can use reprex. So my little note here. Okay, so reprex comes with a bunch of arguments. So if you do, the typical question mark reprex, or if you step on the name of the function and press F1, you access, of course, the health file, and here you will see that even though reprex feels very natural and you can just call it and it will work, there is a bunch of options that you can use, and some of them are pretty cool. So I wanted to show you in this very brief overview some of the options that I think are the coolest. So to begin with, session information. Sometimes it's important to know which environment you are using when you run the code. In this particular case, I chose to add the package version explicitly as part of the reprex, but I could have omitted that, and then instead I could have done, let me select the code again, copy it again with Ctrl-C, go to the console. I'm going to clear this up with Ctrl-L and type reprex, but now this time, I didn't want to do that, reprex. But this time I'm going to use an argument. I'm going to say session info equals true, and only now run reprex. So notice that the output now, if I scroll down, not only has the code the code and the output as you expect, but also has this drop-down menu that if you click there, you have information about all the environment that was running at the time you run the reprex. So for example, I'm running an operative system, Ubuntu 20.04.3, blah, 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 and it includes the version of, for example, FS, which in this particular example is particularly useful because it is the version that exposes the bug, right? So sometimes including that argument is crucial. I hear a bing for comments. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
is the drop-down menu something that's supported in Markdown? Like, does that just show up in a given
Yes, absolutely. Actually, let me show you now. If I create a new file here, because you are familiar with Markdown, R Markdown, and maybe a little HTML, you will probably identify what's happening here. So if I paste the reprex that is now stored in my clipboard, you will see that it has this HTML tag details, which surrounds the thing that is going to be included in the drop-down menu. So basically, the details tag is what adds the drop-down menu magic.
Very cool.
Right, let me go back to the mic. Good. So let's refresh what other ways I wanted to show you to use Reprex. Okay, venue. So what happens is that sometimes, the output of Reprex is optimized as Jackson just kind of suggested for GitHub. In general, you can post them usually in GitHub issues, but you can post them in, pull requests. You can post them in gists, which are very useful as well. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but I'm gonna show you just in a moment. If I go to gist.github.com, everyone who has an account on GitHub has access to this gist.github.com, which is a place where you can just create a file and paste whatever you want, including a reprex. So let's do reprex example.md, an MD file, and create a public gist. Here, public gist. If I click the green button, just as Jackson was asking, so now I get this expandable menu because it's the feature comes from HTML. It has nothing to do really with Reprex. So now Reprex is reusing the option of collapsible HTML text. So yeah, that's gist. So the other thing that I think is super cool is that the output can be optimized for different venues. So as I said before, GitHub is the default, but for example, if you want to post that on Slack, it will look pretty ugly. Let's see if I have Slack here. Slack.com app.slack. Well, maybe I'm not gonna do that in case some kind of private conversation pops up. But basically, you know how in Slack, if you do backtick, it creates a code chunk, and then whatever goes there, is shown as code. So I use that quite a bit to share small reprexes. So the way you do that is again, you can select the code as you did before, and now if you want to optimize for Slack, you can do reprex underscore Slack, and that will create the output slightly tweaked, optimized for Slack. Or there is one that I use a lot too, which is reprex _r, which just creates the vanilla code without the backticks included. So let's see. Yeah, this is the output now. So this usually what I do is I use reprex _r, and I go to Slack, press backtick to generate a code chunk, and then I just paste what reprex gave me when I run reprex _r. So that's the way I used it a lot, just to share small reprexes on Slack. But if the reprex gets long, I prefer to create a gist and instead share not the snippet itself, but instead a link to the gist instead. Let's go back to my memory refresher. Okay, so another cool feature is the input argument, which allows you to basically write the reprex in a file and then call it from your reprex. So if, for example, in this case, you can see how I have here in my files menu, my files tab, I have this file called issue 205. So that file actually contains the same reprex that we're working with right now. So because I am now, let's see where I'm, get WD, where I'm in my system. So I at the root of reprex, but then in this folder 01 overview, I have this file. So what I could do now to run that reprex, let me do it here. I could do reprex. I could do input and say 01 underscore overview, and then search for the file issue 205. So if I run that, I'm gonna get the exact same thing, which is sometimes convenient because you explore and develop your reprex usually in maybe an untitled file. Then when you reach a good point of that reprex, then you create a file and maybe you save it, and then you can just leave it there and call it with reprex and the argument input. Finally, for the call directly to Reprex, the other way I wanted to show you how you can run Reprex is with directly passing an expression. So say that I have this code, I do not want to bother actually saving the file. One thing I can do is to wrap all this in Reprex. So let's do this, Reprex. So here, I could paste just the expression, but because this is a multi-line expression, I need braces. So if you're not familiar with the braces, they allow you basically to inject multiple lines as if they were one. R will know how to read that. So you can now paste the expression. Usually it messes up my formatting, so I do Control A to select all, then Shift Control A to run the formatter, the automatic formatter of RStudio, the one that CJ likes a lot. And that will give me a beautiful format that I can use to just now press Control Enter and run the Reprex. But the beauty of this is that because you are calling the function directly, you can now add arguments. So I could say now session information, and you can start kind of building the Reprex that you like the most. And you can say something else, maybe venue R. So you're polishing your Reprex here by giving it some arguments. The expression is there, and now you are tweaking the output by using the arguments, right? So in this case, if I scroll down, I would expect to see the session information thingy. Yeah, there it is, as you can see. Let me see where we are at. Okay, so the last add-in, the last way to create Reprexes that I want to show is another add-in that comes from with Reprex. I did show you, let's close this file without saving because I don't want to, well, in any case I have Git so I can check it out. So here is it. So the other way I wanted to show you is the other add-in. Remember when I did, when I popped up the commands navigation bar with Shift Control P and started typing Reprex, I get two options. So the one that is more feature is render Reprex. If you click there, you will get a GUI that allows you to basically pass a bunch of the arguments that you can use if you call Reprex, if you call the function itself, but you can select them from here. For example, you can say, current selection is where you should be looking for the source code. The target venue should be a Slack message, and then you just go render. I hear the bingy for comments or questions. Please go ahead. Perfect. Thanks, Jackson. I have very little to cover. So I'm going to push for 2 more minutes. So the first thing I want to show is the other side of the equation, right? So so far I've been showing you how you create a Reprex to share with someone else, but the conversation is between at least 2 parties, or maybe yourself in the future, whatever. But so basically, if the other person gets the output of a Reprex, the Reprex could look something like this, right? So it has the code, like this is the vanilla code, but then line 5 here has output, right? So what is beautiful about Reprex is that it just works. So the other person reading Reprex may not even need to run anything because the output is already included. So that's the first thing that is part of the philosophy of the package. So if the other person doesn't want to and they get what's going on, they do not need to run anything. But then if they choose to, it should be easy. And why? Well, because the output is there, but it's commented, and you can compare it right away with what you get. So on the other side of the equation, someone gets your Reprex, they select it from say GitHub, whatever, right? And they have it in their clipboard, and then they go to their console, they just paste it there, and they run the code, and it runs. It doesn't break because the output is commented, right? So as you can see, this line here is shows that because the output is commented, this line does not break the execution of that code, and I can now compare what I get in my specific environment, which is a.csv and b.na, and I can confirm that it's the same thing that the person who created the Reprex gets in their own environment. Right? So that's one beauty of Reprex. But that's not all. So if this is what I have in my clipboard, remember it has the output. You can also clean it up to extend it. So you can use the function reprex_clean, and that will go to your clipboard, remove all those lines that belong to output, and make it clean so that you can paste it and get just the output. And why that might be useful? Well, because maybe you want to continue the conversation and maybe edit the reprex. Say, I don't know, I'm going to remove the assignment to file here and replace it by the inlining its contents. So this is the same reprex now reformatted differently. So I can, I'm on the other side of the world. I read that reprex, I copied it, I cleaned it with reprex_clean. I edited it a little bit, and now I can create it again with render reprex or render selection, which the one I actually like the most is render selection. So I'm going to click that one. And there it is, my new reprex that I'm going to share with the world. It's going to, I'm going to paste it like this, and I'm going to share it again. And the very last thing I wanted to show is that sometimes life is not so easy, and you can't just create data on the fly. So this thing here that I called files before, right, is a piece of data. It could be a data set, it could be whatever, but it's just a piece of data. And now I'm creating it with code on the same file where I create the reprex. So that's the ideal world. That's what makes the whole thing reproducible. But the real world in which I live is not so good. It's not so nice. So sometimes I need to rely on files that exist in my system. So if I wanted to read a file, say the file paths, this one here, actually maybe I think this file doesn't really work that well. But let's see. So if I wanted to read that file, I could do something like read RDS, and I would give the path to that file 01 overview paths. So I can do that here, right, in my own system. I can create, that file's object that I showed you before, and now I can, run it. It kind of seems to work. But what happens when I call reprex? So I'm going to copy this code, go to the console, clean with Control L, and call reprex. What I get is an error. And why? Because reprex, to ensure that the code is reproducible, runs on the background in a completely fresh environment, in a completely temporary context. So it has no access to the file that I have in my own environment, in my own working directory. So how do you hack that and actually share reprexes that might not be reproducible, but do show the point, what happens when you actually use a specific file, and maybe you email that file to the other person, and then kind of the picture completes? Well, the trick to that is the argument WD. So how I use it, usually first I create the reprex locally, then I cut that code, call reprex. I do the curly braces thing, paste that there, format it with Control Shift A, and now add the argument. We can do it, here. WD equals here. That means working directory is where I'm standing right now, my current working directory. And now when you run that reprex, fingers crossed, that should work. And here it is. So, of course, the other person in the other side of the world if they don't have the same project that I have, they won't be able to reproduce this in their own environment. They will need me to email them or Slack them or whatever, the file that I'm reading here. But if they do get access to that file, then they will be able to reproduce this reprex. Okay, I think that covers everything. Let me just confirm. Yeah, so that's what I call a not so reprex, not so reproducible example on your working directory. All right, a few minutes to the end, so please shoot with your questions and comments.
Talking about Repraxes for a couple weeks tomorrow.
Yeah, so today I hope that anyone who does not join in the future will have at least the mechanics of the package. But yeah, I'm hoping to have 1 or 2 more sessions. No, sorry, 2 or maybe 3 sessions more, including some aspects of the design of the package.
Okay. So that answered my question, or what I was trying to get at. So I wanted to make a point or say something about, I think that the Reprex package is super cool. And I'm also super happy that I work primarily in a field or with a language that is so into making minimal reproducible examples that there is a package specifically for this. But at the end of the day, the package is simply a tool that makes creating a reprex easier. which is great. It's fantastic. But I think the idea of why and how one conceptually creates a reproducible example is super important and relevant, not only for R, but for all languages, and even for things that go outside of a language, for instance, a website. So if we have analysts saying like, oh, I keep seeing this problem on the website, the concept of what a reproducible example is valid also in that context. So I think it would be interesting, one, to talk about a reprex, what it means, why, how it works, and how it helps someone. Yeah, I mean, I think you get the point. And then also an additional point similar to this is we talked about
Thanks, CJ. Yeah, I totally agree. To the point that, I mean, if you're interested in what CJ has just said, then do join next meetup, which is going to cover the vignette Reprex do's and don'ts, which basically goes into detail about each of the topics that CJ commented at a very general level beyond the actual implementation in the Reprex package. So why you would want to do, a minimal example as opposed to any example and things like that. And then at the end of that article includes a very small section about the design of the package, about the philosophy of the package, which I think, for those who are more tech oriented, it would be such a joy just to talk about how the philosophy was first explicitly set with just 3 bullet points, and then how that decision drove the entire design of the package. So whether the function should do this or that was clear once they determined what's the philosophy of the package. So that's super cool too. But that might be another session, maybe the third one, and only for those who are interested in building tools. Monica, I see your hand up. The unpleasant answer is that you can't ensure that the other person has the same environment. All you can do with Reprex is to share the session information so they know which packages you have. And then the way to ensure is beyond the scope of Reprex and would be something more related to the previous series that we ran, which is Docker. So, if for some reason you want to ensure that the code that you run is going to run in a specific environment, the tool that today is best fit for that is Docker. So basically you ship the entire computer that contains not just the code, but also the operating system, the R packages, the specific R version, and so on. But usually that's an overkill. For most scenarios, it's not a problem. But if that is your particular situation, absolutely, get in contact with anyone who has, basically anyone who can help you debug the issue, maybe on a help desk or however you like. It's a bit of a tricky thing if it's an environment issue, so maybe I would suggest anyone with a strong background in debugging shit.
All right.
It's not an easy problem to solve. That's unfortunate, but that's the case.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
I would just jump in and say, like, this is where, like, the minimal part of it comes into play, because if you've minimized your example, then hopefully you're using the least amount of packages as possible, and then, like, this type of problem becomes much more clear because it's easy to verify the comes.
Yeah, good point. Usually, in the process of minimizing your reproducible example, you actually clarify your thinking or about your assumptions, right? I assume that the problem is related to these 10 problems, but then you narrow it down to a point where, it has to be this or that, and then by the time you get there, usually you don't even need someone's help because you kind of answer your own question. But it's a tool to do it in a systematic way, as opposed to kind of like waving your hands and running around. You have there a tool to prove that something is or is not related to your problem. Okay, that brings us to the end. So this half hour was a super fast overview of the package. Hopefully this will be a record for those in the future who want to learn about Reprex. And if you're interested in more details, you can join the rest of the meetups. But we're going to be talking about things that are kind of beyond the usage of the package, and mostly about what it means for a Reprex to be good, or why the package is so good and it feels so good when you use it. And that is because it has a philosophy, and the implementation of the package responds directly to that philosophy. And because it's made by my idol, Jenny Bryan, who is amazing. Thank you. See you next time.
Thanks, Mauro. Bye.